Hi, welcome to Auntie Sermons. I'm Crystal J. I'll be your auntie for today. Don't worry, these are not your grandpa's sermons. Here, we decenter men and talk about the women in the Bible, all of them, named and unnamed. So get yourself something to drink, get comfortable, you might want some tissues, and let's get on with the show. This episode of Auntie Sermons, we're talking about a woman the Bible never bothered to name, but whose body carried an entire future. We're going back to the story of Cain, not to rehash the murder, but to look at the silence that follows it. The unnamed woman who gets no voice, no credit, and no humanity in the text. And what that erasure teaches us about whose stories get told and whose get buried. This is about absence, power, and why naming still matters. This is Auntie Sermons, Episode 2. The woman God didn't bother to name. Episode 2, The Woman God Didn't Bother to Name. When I was a little girl, the story of Cain and Abel always made me sad. Not confused, not curious, sad. Because even before I had language for theology or trauma, I heard something underneath the story. I heard the question that haunted me. What if my gift isn't good enough? Cain brings what he has and God rejects it. The text says, Yahweh respected Abel and his offering, but he didn't respect Cain and his offering. Genesis 4, 4 and 5. The text never tells us why, no explanation, no correction, no guidance, just rejection. That landed hard for me because I knew what it felt like not to be chosen. My mother left when I was 3. She left 8 children behind. I grew up believing that if I had been better, easier, quieter, less work, maybe she would have stayed. My father wasn't in the picture because he was arrested for child abuse. I don't know every detail, but I know enough. Physical, emotional, verbal, sexual. And my mother knew who he was, and she left us anyway. So when I read about Cain standing before God, offering what he had and being rejected without explanation, I didn't see a moral lesson. I saw a child learning that love is conditional. This God, supposedly all-knowing, knew exactly what would happen next. Knew the rage, knew the violence, knew the murder. God says to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why has the expression of your face fallen? If you do well, won't it be lifted up? If you don't do well, sin crouches at the door." Genesis 4, 6 and 7. Cain kills his brother. The text says, Yahweh said to Cain, "Where is Abel, your brother?" He said, "I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper?" Genesis 4, 9. Cain tries to hide from God, which makes no sense if God is all-knowing and all-present. Cain is afraid someone will kill him. Instead of accountability, God marks Cain not for punishment, but for protection. The text says, Yahweh put a mark on Cain, lest anyone finding him should strike him. Genesis 4:15. The first murder in the Bible is protected by God. Cain is sent away, but not alone. Because the text says, Cain knew his wife, she conceived and bore Enoch. Genesis 4:17. Let's stop pretending that sentence is neutral. Cain fucked her. That is the first and only thing the Bible tells us about this woman. No name, no origin, no voice, no fear, no choice. Cain gets a name, Cain gets dialogue with God. Cain gets emotions, anger, shame, fear. Cain gets divine protection. Cain gets a future. The woman who has to live with a marked murderer gets silence. She is not a partner. She is not a survivor. She is a function, a womb, an incubator. And yet everything that comes next depends on her. Cain builds a city. Who fills it? Cain has descendants. Who carries them? Civilization itself flows through her body, and her name is not worth recording. The Bible names Cain's descendants, men who build, men who invent, men who create culture. And alongside that progress comes escalation. Violence grows. Patriarchy hardens. Women multiply and disappear. By the time we reach Lamech, Cain's descendant, we see a man boasting about murder and domination. He says, I have slain a man for wounding me, a young man for bruising me. Genesis 4:23. He speaks to his wives. They never speak back. From the very beginning, violent men get stories. Women get silence. The murderer is protected. The builder is remembered. The woman who carried the future is erased. And that erasure didn't stay in Genesis. This unnamed woman has been shamed for centuries. Some teachings reduce her to Cain's sister, turning her into something people treat as disgusting instead of asking what was done to her. Other teachings strip her of humanity altogether and treat her like a necessary object, a means to an end. And that way of thinking is still alive. It shows up when men look women in the eye and tell them they don't matter, that they're just women, that this is a man's world and they should get over it. I've had a boss say exactly that to me. This is a man's world, get over it. That sentence didn't come out of nowhere. It comes from stories where men are named and women are used, where men are protected and women are erased, where harm gets justified and silence gets normalized. And when we keep telling these stories without naming that violence, we are not neutral. We are actively harming women. So now I want to speak directly to the men listening. If you give a shit about justice, this is where it becomes practical. Listen when women speak and don't interrupt, correct, or redirect. Actually pay attention. Give credit every time it's due. If a woman made you laugh, say her name. If you learned something from a woman, say her name. Amplify women's voices on purpose. Share their work. Support them publicly and financially. Do it more than feels fair because men's voices are already amplified by default. I watch men pour hundreds and thousands of dollars into supporting other men while women doing the same work are ignored. That imbalance isn't accidental, it's learned. And it's learned from stories where Cain gets a name, a future, and a legacy, and his wife doesn't even get to be human. So this is my work now, to tell the stories of the women who were erased, to name the violence, to refuse the silence. Because if we can tell a story where a murderer gets protection and a woman doesn't even get a name, we are actively harming every little girl and their future. Thank you so much for listening to Auntie Sermons. If this episode resonated with you, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and share it with a friend or two. If you'd like to financially support the podcast, you can find those links in the show notes. You can also find me online. I am Crystal J, all one word, J-A-E, on both YouTube and TikTok. So come say hi, or argue politely, or you could just lurk. I see you. And remember, this is Auntie Sermons. We bring the tea, we question the story, and we absolutely do not apologize for it. Fuck the patriarchy. I'll see you next time. Don't forget, I'm a nice lady.